The Lost Sanjak by Saki. The prison chaplain entered the condemned's cell for the last time to give such consolation as he might. "The only consolation I crave for," said the condemned, "is to tell my story in its entirety to someone who will at least give it a respectful hearing." "We must not be too long over it," said the chaplain, looking at his watch. The condemned repressed a shiver and commenced. "Most people will be of opinion that I am paying the penalty of my own violent deeds. In reality, I am a victim to a lack of specialization in my education and character." "Lack of specialization?" said the chaplain. "Yes. If I'd been known as one of the few men in England familiar with the fauna of the Outer Hebrides, or able to repeat stanzas of Camone's poetry in the original, I should have had no difficulty in proving my identity in the crisis when my identity became a matter of life and death for me. But my education was merely a moderately good one, and my temperament was of the general order that avoids specialization. I know a little in a general way about gardening and history and old masters, but I could never tell you offhand whether Stella van der Loopen was a chrysanthemum or a heroine of the American War of Independence or something by Romney in the Louvre." The chaplain shifted uneasily in his seat. Now that the alternatives had been suggested, they all seemed dreadfully possible. "I fell in love, or thought I did, with the local doctor's wife," continued the condemned. "Why I should have done so I cannot say, for I do not remember that she possessed any particular attractions of mind or body. On looking back at past events, it seems to me that she must have been distinctly ordinary, but I suppose the doctor had fallen in love with her once, and what a man had done, man can do. She appeared to be pleased with the attentions which I paid her, and to that extent I suppose I might say she encouraged me, but I think she was honestly unaware that I meant anything more than a little neighbourly interest. When one is face to face with death, one wishes to be just." The chaplain murmured approval. "At any rate, she was genuinely horrified when I took advantage of the doctor's absence one evening to declare what I believed to be my passion. She begged me to pass out of her life, and I could scarcely do otherwise than agree, though I hadn't the dimmest idea of how it was to be done. In novels and plays I knew it was a regular occurrence, and if you mistook a lady's sentiments or intentions, you went off to India and did things on the frontier as a matter of course. As I stumbled along the doctor's carriage drive, I had no very clear idea as to what my line of action was to be, but I had a vague feeling that I must look at the Times Atlas before going to bed. Then, on the dark and lonely highway, I came suddenly on a dead body." The chaplain's interest in the story visibly quickened. "Judging by the clothes it wore, the corpse was that of a Salvation Army captain. Some shocking accident seemed to have struck him down, and the head was crushed and battered out of all human semblance. Probably, I thought, a motor car fatality. And then, with a sudden overmastering insistence, came another thought, that here was a remarkable opportunity for losing my identity and passing out of the life of the doctor's wife forever. No tiresome and risky voyage to distant lands, but a mere exchange of clothes and identity with the unknown victim of an unwitnessed accident. With considerable difficulty I undressed the corpse and clothed it anew in my own garments. Anyone who's valeted a dead Salvation Army captain in an uncertain light will appreciate the difficulty. With the idea, presumably, of inducing the doctor's wife to leave her husband's roof tree for some habitation which would be run at my expense, I'd crammed my pockets with a store of banknotes, which represented a good deal of my immediate worldly wealth. When, therefore, I stole away into the world in the guise of a nameless Salvationist, I was not without resources which would easily support so humble a role for a considerable period. I tramped to a neighbouring market town, and, late as the hour was, the production of a few shillings procured me supper and a night's lodging in a cheap coffee-house. The next day I started forth on an aimless course of wandering from one small town to another. I was already somewhat disgusted with the upshot of my sudden freak. In a few hours' time I was considerably more so. In the contents bill of a local news sheet I read the announcement of my own murder at the hands of some person unknown. On buying a copy of the paper for a detailed account of the tragedy, which at first had aroused in me a certain grim amusement, I found that the deed ascribed to a wandering Salvationist of doubtful antecedents, who'd been seen lurking in the roadway near the scene of the crime. I was no longer amused. The matter promised to be embarrassing. What I had mistaken for a motor accident was evidently a case of savage assault and murder, and until the real culprit was found, I should have much difficulty in explaining my intrusion into the affair. Of course I could establish my own identity, but how, without disagreeably involving the doctor's wife, could I give any adequate reason for changing clothes with the murdered man? While my brain worked feverishly at this problem, I subconsciously obeyed a secondary instinct to get as far away as possible from the scene of the crime, and to get rid at all costs of my incriminating uniform. There I found a difficulty. I tried 2 or 3 obscure clothes shops, but my entrance invariably aroused an attitude of hostile suspicion in the proprietors, and on one excuse or another they avoided serving me with the now ardently desired change of clothing. The uniform that I had so thoughtlessly donned seemed as difficult to get out of as the fatal shirt of, I forget the creature's name. Yes, said the chaplain hurriedly. Get on with your story.